Welcome back to Media7, where we're surveying the 18-year story of the Independent Business Weekly. With me now are three men who are part of the story in different ways. The Independent's backseat benefactor, Tony Timpson. One of many graduates from the Indie newsroom, Sunday Star Times business editor, Rob O'Neill. And long-time columnist from the left, Chris Trotter. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Tony, I presume you'd known Warren and Jenni for a little while before the Independent launched. I'm interested in what it was about them that made you open your chequebook.
Oh, I believed in them. They were pretty keen on what they wanted to do, and I believed in what they wanted to do. I was quite looking forward to it. I'd been sort of Randy Stone in fantasies for a long time, and to be involved with the paper was part fantasy, part life. Yeah, it was good.
What did your business colleagues make of it? Did they think you were mad?
Yes. But that wasn't a strange business. They all thought I was mad anyway, so it just confirmed them, really.
There's a certain irony here, I think, in that many of the best business newspapers have not been profitable. It's not just the Independent, it's the Australian Financial Review, which was subsidised by Fairfax for something like 17 years. Why is that?
I think if they're successful newspapers, they've got this problem of if they expose the darker side of business, it's very unlikely that they'll attract a lot of advertising. And as you probably realise, the paper won't exist without advertising.
Do you think that was a particular problem for Warren and Jenni as owner-editors, that they were particularly vulnerable in that respect?
I think if you're going to be a crusader, that you've got to expect something like that. As that if you're going to be hold to those principles, that you won't achieve as much as somebody who's sycophantic and looks after their advertisers before they look after the news.
Did you ever get worried at the way, I mean, Warren, I gather, was famous for the way he would treat complaining advertisers and also for never backing down on a defamation action. Did you ever get the fear sometimes? Obviously,
yeah. The law doesn't help papers at all. It's very difficult in defamation cases to hold your ground. It's going to cost you whichever happens. Even defending yourself is a very costly exercise. Even if you win, you've lost. And that was part and parcel of the history.
Yeah, I recall interviewing Hugh Rennie at the time of Warren's death, and he said that Warren didn't want to be all over the New Zealand's defamation case law.
Neither did I.
But he wasn't going to back down.
No, that's quite true.
Yeah. Rob O'Neill, you're on a long list of graduates from the Warren and Jenni Academy, which includes Vincent Herringer, John Stevenson, Patrick Smelly. What did it do for you? Because I get the impression that everyone who went through that newsroom, even if they didn't stay for very long, came out a different and better journalist.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly fair assumption. I mean, I guess my experience was that I hadn't reported business before, so it was a bit of a leap, I think, for Jenni to hire me. It was Jenni that actually hired me. And then you go in there and you're not exactly dropped in it, because there was actually a lot of support. I mean, I've always found Jenni and Warren both very supportive. You would sometimes sit on their shoulder. I remember distinctly sitting on Jenni's shoulder while she was subbing some of my stories, and you learn that way. There was no formal training, but there was a hell of a lot of informal training and a lot of experience. You know, you just go out there and start doing it and start producing stories, and if you're any good, you survive and move on.
Yeah, Chris, you had this story too, didn't you? You began as a columnist, but Warren coached you through writing some quite major news stories.
Oh, Warren was a wonderful mentor. He represented to me that classic American editor. You know, the guy who we tend to caricature with the little green visor and the arm suspenders to keep his shirt sleeves up. Working at his little press in some prairie town, taking on the big ranches. That was the sort of guy that he was. The story that I remember most vividly was the one about Generation Lost, which the Business Roundtable kind of stage managed from a discreet distance. But, you know, he talked me through the process of a story that was obviously going to ruffle some feathers. Just the experience of being with an editor like that. You picked up not only the tricks of the trade, but the ethics of the trade. And Warren Berryman was a very ethical person.
And yet some people might have looked at the peer review and thought, what's this barely reconstructed Marxist got in common with this anti-government capitalist here?
Well, as Warren said, what he believed in was the free marketplace, not just in terms of commerce, but in terms of ideas. And what I think he understood about the sort of perspective that I brought to bear was that it was one which a lot of business people weren't familiar with, and which challenged them and made them think about things from a slightly different angle. And over the years, I've had that view reinforced by the most unlikely people. Don Brash is a great fan, for example.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, Tony, because I get the impression that the way I worked out what it was that there was a political philosophy there, but not a political allegiance. Do you think that's how it was?
It was about as neutral as you could get, really. I think independent's a pretty good word. And while long he may have delivered the speech, he was a Prime Minister at the time, and it's worth recalling what he said at the time. No, I've forgotten that, actually, but it was along the lines that it was independent, it produced independent news, and that's what was achieved. And Warren was a stickler to keep those things sacrosanct.
Rob, how did the independent newsroom compare to other newsrooms you've worked in? Was there more time spent down the pub getting stories?
There was more time spent down the pub. The sort of message you got from Jenni and Warren was that you know, they didn't really mind you going down the pub as long as you were talking to sources. But of course, the constant complaint was that we'd actually go down the pub together as journalists and hang out down there, and sometimes not come back. And then either Jenni or Warren would sometimes turn up, and they'd either hustle you back to the newsroom or join you. You know, it was a 50-50 choice which way it would go. So yeah, there was a lot of drinking going on. In terms of the newsroom itself. You know, I thought the technology was fairly primitive. I mean, there was ancient old Apple Macs they had on there and so forth. But Warren's attitude to technology was very odd. I mean, it was on one hand, I do believe he was resistant to it. You know, he was a late adopter, you might say. But once it was there, he got on top of it very, very quickly. And he was laying up pages in Quark Express. You know, you saw on the video him stripping in. He was a master at stripping a newspaper together the old-fashioned way. But towards the end, he was able to sit down and do Quark Express and produce pages as well. So, you know, he wasn't the first to adopt any technology, but once it was there, he really got his head around it very quickly.
Chris, the paper survived 14 years under what could be seen as Tony's patronage, and 4 years as part of a corporate news organisation. Do you think there's a lesson in that?
Well, I think the big lesson to be drawn from the history of The Independent is that there is an enormous difference between a publication that starts from scratch, as Fiona and Jenni alluded to earlier, that is driven by a vision, by passion, is backed by someone like Katie Graham, who is willing to get her tit caught in the ringer for a good story, and a paper which is there primarily to return a dividend to shareholders. I mean, it's a perfectly legitimate objective to return a dividend for shareholders, but it's never going to be the same sort of publication as The Independent or, say, Rogers Metro in its early phase. These start-up, these lifelong ambitions in the form of the printed word are a very different product from the sort of thing you get from a corporate stable.
And yet we do see these independent publications eventually subsumed into larger publishing groups and tending to lose their identity. Is there a solution there? I mean, something like The Guardian with the Scott Trust, perhaps?
Well, yes. I mean, in the future, it may be that we look upon independent information in the same way we look upon the supply of electricity or clean water as just a necessary part of civilised life.
You're talking about the government paying for it?
Well, the government, local authorities, whoever. Warren, of course, would
I'm
say...
just taking...
You damn socialist, that's exactly what you would say, but I think it's a real problem. We look at newspapers all around the world and they are struggling. And democracy needs that sort of fearless, independent approach to journalism. The Tony Timpsons of this world, the Warren Berrymans, the Jenni McManuses, sadly, are few and far between.
What do you make of that, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's absolutely correct. I mean, I think I don't believe that the big media has abdicated. I think there's a lot of pressure on at the moment. I mean, there's certainly a lot of the economic times we're in, and the changes to online media and so forth are very trying for old media. But I don't believe that there's any real sense of abdicating responsibility. I think everybody's still working very hard. The funny thing is, in terms of the Independence newsroom, it was a very hard-working place. Despite everything, people worked really, really hard, and that is one thing that has spread right throughout the rest of the media now, because the pressure really is on, and so it was great preparation for modern media, really, being at the Independent.
I don't know, as an employer's point of view, whether that's a good thing at all.
Well, it's the way it is.
Well, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. And now for something completely different. Sarah Daniels' Take Two takes us to a place you may have thought only existed in the minds of men.
While the world's media is transfixed on the big league in South Africa, Fox Network in America turns on a perv fest to boost morale for the lads back home.
There are no bra and panties. There's another name for this. Genius!
For your viewing pleasure, there's the San Diego Seduction.
It's about being on top.
Dallas Desire, Orlando Fantasy.
Break a nail and get right back out there.
What's this? A quiet night in at Shane Jones' place, you ask? No, it's the Lingerie Football League, or the LFL, for those spectators who can't cope with big words. The LFL are like cheerleaders, but with steroids and shoulder pads.
This is our game now.
Give me some T. Give me some A. It's a form of American football played halftime at the Super Bowl. The chicks are uniformly attractive, but they have the ugly, potty-mouthed coach, just like in real sport.
If I played on defense on this team, I would be f***ing pissed off right now.
Real sport, like beach volleyball. Sports coverage still a male bastion? Get off the grass tennis court. Tennis! Hell, it's not enough to have a serve that travels faster than the speed of sound. Are those Armani nude shorts you're wearing, Venus?
A lot more people watching now, by the way, too, I think.
Oh, well, let's not get too serious about it. The Super Bowl can have the LFL for a bit of LOL, and we can all give ourselves a standing ovation for just how far we've come.
That's for me, I'm out of here.
Sarah Daniel reporting undercover there. And that's our show for this week. Thanks to Fiona Rotherham, Jenni McManus, Tony Timpson, Rob O'Neill and Chris Trotter. And as ever, thanks to you for watching. We'll be back with Media7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.